Hello, I'm here at the International Conference on Men's Issues 2019 with DeAnna Lorraine.
Hey.
She's just delivered a cracking speech and gave a fantastic talk.
Thank you.
And apparently, you're running for Congress as well.
Yes. I recently, because I'm crazy, decided to run against Nancy Pelosi in California's 12th district. And the big reason why I'm running for Congress is because I actually want to bring a lot of these men's rights issues to the forefront, in the spotlight. I've never seen any politician or congressional candidate um, or congressperson bring any attention to men's issues, and even to the family. And it's time, because all of our problems in our country and other countries is stemmed from fatherlessness, this epidemic of fatherlessness, and a lack of real healthy masculinity in the world. It's time that we address these issues in a public forum and have an intellectually honest discussion about it.
So you're just going to try and get out there and go on various media sources and just give
Yeah.
the information, the spiel about what we've been talking about in
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
anti-feminist movement and
Right. Well, part of the, part of my platform is restoring and strengthening the family unit. Okay. And so, how do you strengthen the family unit? Well, first of all, you try to prevent divorces in general. And so, I have a child tax credit that I'm increasing, and I'm also going to try to remove the marriage penalty tax, which is pretty crazy that you can get penalized for getting married with a tax. But so we're gonna do what's called a pro marriage and family tax code. But the other things is going to, if the inevitable happens, or not the inevitable, but if a divorce happens, um, what we want to do is reduce or remove no fault divorce laws, and at the very least revisit no fault divorce laws, because we have not had a public conversation, an honest conversation about no fault divorce laws since it became the law of the land in the 1960s. And it's obvious that it's played a huge role in rocketing the divorce and having women initiate 90% of the divorces. So we really need to revisit no fault divorce laws and see if there's a way that we can even do away with them. And then if it happens where you do get divorced, there needs to be a shared 50-50 custody presumption with families. No longer should it be that a woman can just leave a dad, right, and go to another state or another city without the dad's consent, really,
yeah,
and have a father or a mother not be involved in their child's life. For me, because I come from a broken family, my mother moved to the other side of the state, remarried, and all of a sudden my dad was seeing me every day in a happy family to seeing me a couple hours a month maybe. And that just has too many side effects for both males and females. So a shared 50-50 custody presumption, and we also want to make parental alienation a crime. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And so, just looking at this process that occurs often during divorces and
Yeah.
say after the divorce, where
Right.
I do think it's quite often the mum who does this, and
It
it's
is.
just kind of training the children to hate their father.
Yeah, and it's so, call me sexist, but I am. But women tend to be a lot more irrational and emotional than men. So women can't have a harder time putting their feelings aside. And when they're in a position of they feel resentful because to their husband or ex-husband, they put that all on the kids. Now their kids end up hating their own dad and are alienated from them. And just we know, studies have proven over and over again the vast importance of a dad to their daughter and to their son. It just can't be understated. And when someone grows up in a fatherless home, they are just a statistic, more likely to use and abuse drugs, more likely to be a criminal, more likely to be in jail, grow up in poverty, confused genders. There's just so many different consequences. And it's something that's not only affecting ourselves, our country on a micro level as individuals, but on a macro level, because when you have broken families, it's creating broken people. Broken people are going to be a negative on the country and bring the country down. and potentially grow up in poverty or crime instead of a positive contribution to society.
I think so. I think it's. I think there is a lot of coalescing now, certainly within the anti-feminist movement, and I'd say the general populist movement. There's kind of a people are starting to promote, I'd say, traditionalism and traditional gender values and traditional gender roles.
I would call myself a traditionalist.
Yeah. And so I think it's this idea of promoting the strengths that women have and the strengths that men have.
Yeah.
And again, seeing the family as the building block of civilization.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, a strong argument can be made that it has been that, certainly in the West, for the last 2,500 years. It's all been about the family. And
I mean, look, what I was saying in my speech was it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. I mean, what has changed? My speech was about how toxic masculinity is not to blame for mass shootings, but it's the lack of real masculinity and fathers that are creating toxicity in people in general, but especially boys. They grow up without a father, and a lot of times that they become a negative to society. And if they're not getting validation and respect, like most men are not in this country, they're going to grow up either very deeply resentful and angry or apathetic, and neither is good. Both are destructive. So, but we've always had, at least in America, we've always had the Second Amendment, and we've always had guns. But what has changed? Because only recently there's been mass shootings.
Yeah.
And obviously divorce has skyrocketed in the last several decades, and we before the 1960s didn't have shootings like this.
And you mentioned the Elliot Rodger case.
Yeah, Elliot Rodger. So Elliot Rodger, I think first of all the statistic, I'm pretty sure it's 26 out of 28 mass shooters came from fatherless homes.
Yeah.
Elliot Rodger was a perfect example of that. Just complete case study. Where he even wrote in his manifesto that he had no relationship with his dad growing up. He was very angry. And he started with probably a normal, healthy, masculine need for validation and respect and appreciation growing up. Mm-hmm. But then, like what happens with most men, when you are deprived of respect and appreciation, like most men are, coupled with the fact that he didn't have a dad, it grew on longer and longer. He was getting more and more obsessive with that need, to the point where it became an unhealthy, dangerous, and maniacal need for respect and appreciation. And that led him to be so resentful and angry that, he shot a bunch of people. Mm-hmm. And
from when I read his manifesto, and it seemed that he had it was little interaction with his dad, and the interaction he had, it was really feminized, what his dad told him, and so I think he was at one point he was being bullied at school.
Yes.
And so the solution was to move him to another school, and so he never actually faces up to his demons and the other boys who were troubling him, and therefore he never actually develops.
Exactly. And that's what happens a lot, because men. Good fathers are so good at providing discipline and structure and grounding. A lot of the problems that we have today are just like, if you had a good father to just be like, no, you're not doing that, like put you in your place or give him a good spanking. A lot of times that's a lot of what a guy needs to grow up healthy, right? But we're lacking in disciplined people right now, boys and girls, and no one's putting them in their places, so they grow up as an adult into these terrible behaviors, and then surprise surprise they do terrible things. But the blame is so misplaced. We are so quick to say the problem is men, we just need to shape men up and put their penises away and rid them of this masculinity, this toxic masculinity. But instead we should be coming from them at a place of love and compassion and say, well, what's going on with our men where they're being driven to shoot a bunch of people, where they're being driven to kill themselves, where they're being driven to harass or rape women? What's going on with them, and come from a place of compassion instead of blame and shame.
I do think that there is this possibility that men can become really violent, and the fact is that they kind of have the tools to do that. So You know, they have the physiology that's capable for it, and also a kind of, they can develop a detached psychology, which in, you know, so, yeah, when we look at people like Elliot Rodger or some of the other mass killers, it's that detached psychology that allows them to want to kill all of these other people. But I think one of the things I see is that you know, it's always in these fatherless homes, and that's the mass shooters, but also that's a lot of the say the sociopathic violence that we see here in the USA and also in London now. It's become, you know, the latest kind of praised liberal city to fall apart because of fatherlessness and mass violence as well.
You know, the black family is another great case study because, you know, 84% of black children are born in fatherless homes, right? And their crime is very high. Their poverty level is very high. Their imprisonment level is very high. But everyone's saying that the blame is institutionalized racism for why they're not getting ahead in life, instead of looking at maybe it's the broken family and fatherlessness that they're not getting ahead in life.
Yeah, in London they've come up with all sorts of weird and wonderful excuses. They're saying that, oh yeah, maybe they need to have more after-school clubs and stuff.
Yeah,
and it's like,
why aren't we talking about the root? The root is the family unit, and the family unit is broken right now, and it is, you know, it is the most instrumental unit of society. When the family's broken, the country is broken. And when we have strong men, we create strong families, which then create more strong men, and they create strong nations. Weak men create more weak families and more weak men, which create weak nations.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the kind of sort of heroic feeling towards figures like John Wayne and so on in the past, and I sympathise with this. I think we did used to have positive role models in films, and now it seems that all of the male figures in a lot of Hollywood films are all you know, kind of losers and you know, bumbling idiots and whatnot.
Bumbling idiots, and then, you know, a lot of like feminists have intruded on every last man cave. You know, they've ruined the Boy Scouts in America. They have ruined male only for you know, associations and groups. I know that next on their chopping block is fraternities. You know, college fraternities is what they're praying after right now, and they're starting this whole thing. It's rape culture. It's, you know, fraternities are potential rapists, and that's where most crime happens. I know it's next on the feminist chopping block, and I hope they don't ever let it get broken up by them. But we have lost so many of those male-only spaces because of feminists. So where does a man get guidance from? Where does he get mentorship from? Where does he get men-on-men camaraderie? We have women that have intruded on even the comic industry, and they're forcing, you know, they're making you know, comic strips that used to be beloved by men. Now they're putting all this PC and feminist culture into comic books. I don't know if that's happening in other countries, but it's happening in America. They're, you know, taking popular superhero movies and like feminizing them, you know, getting into their heads, and, you know, they're getting into children's cartoons and making superheroes with women, which there isn't anything wrong with a superhero that's a woman, but don't also, it's a very subtle hypnosis that's going on, where they're subtly trying to teach kids that women are higher up than men, that women actually should be more respected and powerful than men, and it's kicking men down. And it's coming in very subtle, creepy, insidious ways.
Yeah, I remember when it was that show, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I mean, that was back in the 90s, but when that came out, and I was like a teenage boy then, and I think the message was, it was a really bad message, because it was, basically, you don't need to...
have a man.
The man doesn't need to actually be protective or strong in any way, because all of these new chicks are able to walk around kicking men's ass, and you know, all these well, maybe not men, but, you know, like various vampires and that sort of thing, and you know, hot chicks can do that now, so guys don't have to, or something.
Yeah, you're right. Buffy was probably the start of that whole thing, you know, that goes on. But the thing is, like, I love gender roles. I love gender differences. I grew up with 4 brothers, and to me, I think there's nothing better than having a man have some skills and strengths that I don't, and I provide some things and strengths that they don't have, because that's what makes us needed and valuable to each other. By feminists insisting that we are exactly the same, that gender is just a social construct, and that women can do every single thing a man can, and a man can do everything a woman can, we don't need each other. What that actually is doing is diminishing women's value and diminishing her power instead of raising it up. And it seems like they're not smart enough to get that for some reason. I mean, because they're making women useless then to men. What is the point of a woman if he can do everything that she can do and she can do everything that a man can do? Then we're not unique and needed for each other.
Yeah, and then there's not the mutual dependency.
Yeah, the mutual dependency was a great thing. Gender roles, I think, were a great thing. I think even certain roles with women, traditional marriages, I think, and families are great, because then we're mutually dependent. My grandfather couldn't make a cup of coffee or toast to save his life because my grandmother did all the cooking, right? And she couldn't do any of the finances because he took care of all the finances. When he died, sadly, 2 years ago, she was really struggling because she's like, I never looked at a bill in my life because he did everything.
Yeah, sure.
But if she passed away, he wouldn't be able to cook a piece of toast.
Yeah.
And there were just things that the both of them did, but they needed each other so greatly. And men and women did need each other back then. What feminists are doing is they're removing the need that men and women have for each other. And I think that's a very destructive thing, not just sad, but also destructive to society when we don't need each other. What the hell is the point of a woman then?
Right, yeah. And
what's the point of a man?
I just think with this that it's sort of just this kind of feminist idea of saying that women can do all of these male skills and vice, and men apparently can't really do anything anymore, and just kind of contorting of the whole society as around that. And I had a conversation recently. It was with this woman, and it was about a sports player. It was like a rugby player, and he had been concussed a number of times, and so she was coming at the issue from a kind of empathy-led position, and she was saying, oh well, he's just going to have to stop playing the game. And I was thinking, right, I see that you're approaching this issue from an empathy-led position, but what you're saying is that you want complete control over what he does in his future. So, in a way, me coming from the issue, from a fairness perspective, I would see that would be a terrible thing to say to this guy, but it just seems that it's all higgledy-piggledy because we're promoting women. We're saying, go into all of these positions high up in the workplace and just act like women, and then you're not really getting the what was there before, which was the fairness and the justice and the discipline that was promoted, by the male mindset. So
I hate these stupid made-up terms: mansplaining, manspreading. Everything a man does, if even a man compliments a woman, he could be accused of being sexist or benevolent sexism. And mansplaining is the stupidest because it's like he is, part of a masculine trait that is good is wanting to contribute. Right? And so a lot of times men will give advice. Sometimes it's unsolicited advice, but it's advice, but it's coming from a place of wanting to help. Usually it's coming from, hey, I know this, I can help you, I can fix this for you. And now women, with this whole phrase of mansplaining, it's starting to paralyze men and cripple them from this natural instinct of wanting to help, because now they're thinking twice about saying something that might actually be helpful to someone. And we're making men, they can't even spread their legs anymore because they're accused of mansplaining. If they maybe give a compliment, this is a benevolent sexist remark. So it's making men just deprived of their natural instincts and rethinking everything. And that's just a horrible way to live. How can they be powerful when they have muzzles on their mouths and shackles on their ankles? They can't be the man that they're supposed to be. They can't reach their full potential. And I think that's just an absolute crime that women are doing this to men, that they're shackling men in this way. And I don't think men should stand for it either.
Mm-hmm.
Women, it seems like feminist intentions are not equality; they want superiority,
Mm-hmm.
and everything they say, it's a way to control men.
Yeah.
One more thing I'll say unfortunately, I do have some feminist friends. I don't hang out with them too often, but they're from my friends, my leftover friends from college.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
and they went a totally feminist route. But one of them, she offered to have me stay at her house one night in Chicago because she lives here. So I was at her place, and she was like, "So what is this men's conference?" And I was explaining to her what it was, and she just thought it was the funniest thing ever.
Right. Yeah.
She thought it was funny, and what, men have problems? Are you kidding me? Men are
It's
privileged.
an everyday Christmas day for a man.
It's Christmas
stuff.
for men. And she said, everywhere a man walks, he's privileged, and just by being a man. And it just blows my mind that that's their argument. And I said, okay, what about even the fact that 80% of suicides are male? Is that a reason to maybe care? And she says, see, exactly, that's toxic masculinity right there. It's an example of toxic masculinity. Suicide? Yes. So it's really hard to get through to feminists because everything you say it's either it's an example of toxic masculinity or it's an example of privilege to them. And they don't seem to understand that there are so many different areas and venues in a woman's life where she's the privileged one and she gets advantages for being a woman, for her gender.
Yeah, I think that whole attitude is crazy, and it's just so obvious if you open your eyes that you can see men struggling in various situations. I'd say all the time, and certainly from being involved in this movement, I just see some of the utter horrendous positions that men are put in. Whether it comes to divorce or kind of depression situations, and just the fact that the whole societal approach towards them is really maladaptive, and we're not helping these guys out at all. And I just think that women would get a much better deal from men if they did actually go along with this idea of helping men out and being supportive towards them and so on. So
well, feminists are killing off every last ounce of goodwill that men have towards women, and there's not a lot left. The good men that are left in the world, and there's a lot of them, and most of them are good, but if you say that all men are bad and all men are responsible for the crimes committed by a few of them, you're killing off the goodwill that the good men have. And by shaming and blaming all men and saying that they're toxic and wrong just for being a man, then, after enough beatings, you finally just say, F you, I'm going to walk away and make my own. I'm actually surprised that it's taken this many years for guys to finally walk away from women. To be honest with you, I mean, I think if women were treated this way for 60 years, they would have thrown a fit a lot earlier than this. And, men aren't even throwing a fit. They're just raising issues. But men, I think, actually have, it shows a testament to their strength and their patience and their loyalty to women that for 60 years they've basically been beaten down by feminism. And only recently have they begun speaking up.
Yes, I think it's good that they're doing that, and just generally, I'd finish by wishing you well in your forthcoming attempt to. So you're trying to get into Congress as a.
Yeah, I'm running against Nancy Pelosi.
And she's a senator, is it?
She's a congresswoman.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, she's a congresswoman, and in California, crazy communist California.
Right,
And again, and I invite you because I need an army of people.
And
I don't
San
care
Francisco
if you're in the UK.
as well, was this?
Yeah, it's in San Francisco.
Are
so
you also
liberal.
pledging to clean the city up as well?
Clean the city up, clean the homeless up, get people into jobs, build a wall, potentially remove the sanctuary city status that just harbors illegal immigrants. And even if you're from different countries, please support me. Join me on Twitter because Twitter, I'm very active. I tweet every day, all day. And that's going to be a large part of my grassroots movement and army is on Twitter. So please join me on Twitter, DeAnna T. Lorraine. And even if you're in another country, you can still support, especially if you are more conservative leaning, then you'll definitely want to follow my campaign and help, because this is a campaign that I hope, if I win, or even if I don't win, in Congress, it'll be a win to raise these issues in
Yeah,
a public
yeah.
platform. It can have more people, hopefully have a domino effect where more people will publicly speak out. Potentially more politicians will make this a part of their platform too.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk about these very important issues, especially with shared custody.
Yes, yeah, that's absolutely fantastic, and
Yeah.
I wish you all good luck
Thank you
in
so
that
much.
campaign. So thank you for talking to me
Yes.
today as well.
Thank you guys.